All right, good morning. It's the Monday Morning Show. Today on the show, we have a very special guest. Ladies and gentlemen, comedian Mike Donovan. Mike, how's it going?
Doing great. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming on the show.
Appreciate it.
So, first I'd like to ask you, how did you get started in comedy?
Well, I grew up in South Boston, and I was on the street corners doing impressions, and I watched enough TV to know that when you do an impression, you have to add a joke. So there you go. So I'd start doing impressions, and when I would do them, I'd include a joke, and next thing you know, I realized it was something I could do.
And
so I had my mind made up to do that, but there were no comedy clubs, so, but I never had any doubt that I was going to do it. There was zero doubt that I was going to be good at it and I would do it.
So did you start at doing open mics?
There weren't any really. I went to first I became a disc jockey in upstate New York. I was with a charitable organization. I won't mention that. Had talent shows, and it was a private fundraising, or it was a private organization, and we had fundraiser shows, and I used to host the shows and do my comedy there. This was as a teenager. I was about 16, 17. So I did a lot of. Before I hit the real world, I had a little, friendly audience that I got to practice on. The first time I really got out into a potentially hostile crowd, it was in May of 1971. I was 16 years old, and it was at Lowell Tech University, which is now the University of Lowell. It was an outdoor show. There was like 700 people surrounding the stage that looked like a boxing arena almost. So it was surrounded on four sides. And the MC yells out, "There's somebody in the crowd that does impressions. His name is Mike." And I had to fight my way through the crowd and come up on stage. So this is my first time ever facing a potentially hostile crowd. But they were really friendly. And it was great. I did about 15 minutes of impressions, and they were cheering and laughing, and it went super. And I think about how people talk about how comedians talk about how I was bombing for so long, but I was determined to keep doing it, and now I'm a professional comedian. That wouldn't be me, man.
Yeah.
If I started out bad, that would have been the end of it.
Yeah, so
I would have been finished.
You never had any bad experiences at open mics? Or?
Well, if the crowd is horrible, you're in a dive at 1 a.m. in New York, and you're doing you're working for a bad crowd. That could happen. Of course, you have some bad shows, but I mean the big test to get out of the real world, I got off to a great start. But
yeah.
There have been some bad shows. Everybody has. There's situations you can't beat.
Yeah.
You do comedy yourself, right?
Trying to. I've done a few open mics. And,
oh yeah.
Yeah, nothing major, but
Have you seen me work? Have you seen my show?
Yeah, I've seen a couple times. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've also interviewed. I've been doing interviews with some other Boston comedians.
Yeah.
Like I talked to Jack Gallagher and Jimmy Tingle.
Yeah.
And they all seemed like they talked about Jimmy Tingle talked about the Ding Ho. He said that that was a big starting place. Is that one of the places you started at?
Well, by the time of the Ding Ho, I was already a veteran comedian, so I don't see that place the way other people see it. I was already established.
Yeah.
A lot of people got their start there. I was already a 4 or 5 year veteran when that place started doing comedy.
Oh.
But I became a disc jockey in Western New York. I went to a broadcasting school. I dropped out of UMass, and then I went to broadcasting school, and then I'm a disc jockey. I'm a top 40 FM disc jockey in upstate New York. Knocked on the guy's door and said, "Can I do some comedy in between the music?" And I did great. And I said, "Well, can we make a comedy night out of it?" And sure enough, he set me up to do the Mike Donovan show. It was my first paid gig.
Huh.
A lot of people do their first paid gig. They get $25 and they do a 10-minute guest set, right? My first paid gig, I did an hour and a half.
Wow.
Yeah. Did an hour and a half. And here's the best part of this story to me, is that the most overrated thing in the world, people are stunned when I say this, The most overrated thing in the world for a developing comedian, it's valuable, but it's overrated. The most overrated thing in the world for an aspiring comedian is stage time.
Yep.
Can you believe that? That contradicts everything you've ever heard. Stage, it's valuable. Here's the point. I practiced in my house over and over for weeks and months my act. I developed an hour and a half of comedy without practicing it for live audiences. I just practiced in my house.
Wow.
Practiced walking down the street, practiced in my car, practiced while I'm shooting basketball. I had every syllable down pat, and I knew it was pretty well written. And I went on stage for the first time to get a paid gig, and I did an hour and a half, and of that hour and a half, about an hour and 10, I was doing it for the first time ever, and I rocked. Okay, now to this day, I don't have that kind of I don't have that kind of discipline now to do that. I can't write a bit now and walk it on stage 8 minutes long and kill with it. Because when you're an aspiring comic and you need to get into the business, you work harder. Now I'm into other things now. I'm into history. I'm into writing. That's another story. But at the time, I'm like, I got to do this right. I got to do this excellently. And I can honestly say I didn't botch a syllable in an hour and a half at a biker bar.
Wow.
You know, and I rocked. I made $48, not a lot of money. But when you've never made a nickel before, and besides, it's 1974, so that's like making $150 now, you know?
Yeah.
So that was my first paid gig. My second paid gig, I'm at a stripper bar, and I'm going on in between the strippers, and that one didn't go well.
Yeah, I want to imagine. That's a tough place.
Yeah, they threw a bottle at me, and it smashed against the wall behind me.
Wow. Well, were people there expecting comedy?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like to get off the stage, there was a mob of people yelling at me to get off the stage.
Yeah.
So that was a mistake.
But going back to, you said, it kind of amazes me. You said an hour and a half of material. That takes a long time, right? I know when I write something for an open mic, I'll write 5 minutes, and it takes me weeks to write 5 minutes.
Right.
I can only imagine how long it take you a long time to write an hour and a half.
Oh yeah. Well, see, I'm a disc jockey. I go to work in the morning. I play the records. I was a humorous disc jockey. I'd make jokes. I'd kind of like if I didn't like a song, I'd be dumping on it in the background. I was breaking all the rules.
Yeah.
Like I'd knock the needle off the record and it would just scrape across the record. You know, I was doing everything irreverent I could think of, and it was a lot of fun. But I had free time, so what are you going to do with it? You're going to watch a ball game? You're going to read a novel? You're going to work on your comedy act? So I didn't waste any time. Even now, I don't waste time. I'm working on history books, and I just don't like to waste time. So if you don't like to waste time and you're determined to be a comedian, you don't want to watch movies and junky television shows and read crap on the Internet and waste time. If you focus on all your time on what you need to get done in life, it's pretty remarkable how much you can get done. You know, and probably the most impressive thing I've ever done in my life is what I told you, that I started out and I did an hour and a half, you know, and I didn't botch a syllable. Not one. I had the recording. I lost it. Not one joke bombed.
Wow.
And it was a tough little biker bar. What else do you have to do? I'm out shooting baskets for an hour and a half every day. I was heavily into basketball. So what are you doing while you're shooting baskets? Why not walk through your act while you're shooting the baskets?
Yeah.
You know? And if I'm watching the NBA on TV, I can shut the sound off and work on my act while I'm watching the game.
Yeah.
You know, and the next thing you know, so I probably put 5 months of practice into that opening act. And there's a few bits that still survive, you know. I can still do them on stage.
Yeah.
That original act. That was January 17th, 1974. So I've been a professional for whatever that adds up to, 42 years.
Yeah.
Lifetime, right?
Wow.
How old are you?
About 30.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you started pretty early then when you first started.
Yeah. I mean, when you're 16 years old and you're living, you don't have a lot of money, and you know your father is no longer around, and you just you're not going to go to Harvard University.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? I mean, you got to do something.
Yep.
You know, and I used to think, like everybody else in my neighborhood, I hoped I could be a Major League Baseball player. And then when you realize you're not good enough to do that, you got to do something. Then I listened to George Carlin and Bill Cosby albums.
Yeah.
And I said, that's what I'm going to do. Because that was great. And, you know, here's the interesting thing to me. If those albums had 20,000 people going after every joke, that wouldn't have inspired me. What inspired me was the intimacy, the sociology, the beauty of the tinkling of the glasses. You can hear every look. Because in the old days, you recorded a comedy album in a nightclub with about 150 people in it, some classy nightclub. And that has a different flavor to it, those kind of recordings. Those early Cosby albums were not recorded in front of gigantic audiences.
Yeah.
And there's a magic to that. You know, nowadays, I think people tend to record all their albums for adoring gigantic audiences, and it takes something away from the spirit of the stand-up craft, because the way you relate to an audience, it's personal. And when it becomes this gigantic sea of these waves of these kind of laughs, you know, these applauses and laughs, there's a wall between the performer and the audience. It's like it's a gigantic wall. The show is killing, but there's a social wall. It's like he's isolated, the audience is isolated, he's firing the jokes at the crowd's going nuts, but there's a wall.
Yeah.
But when you're talking to 150, 200 people or 70 people, there's no wall. You're right there, and there's a connection, there's a flow. That's what got into my bones. That's what made me say, this is what I'm going to do. If those albums had been performed for auditoriums full of 20,000 people, I might not be a comedian today.
So was George Carlin and Bill Cosby inspirations?
They were by far the best, and if it weren't for those two, I never would have done it.
Yeah.
I became addicted to their albums, and I used to entertain people in the street corners by reciting their bits word for word. Because I'd also do an impression of them, you know.
Yeah.
Wonderful rhino, more hits more often. Rhino time, big boss, 5 minutes after 5 o'clock. It's 4 o'clock in Los Angeles. It's 8 o'clock in Denver. In Baltimore, it's 6:42.
So, can you tell us how you developed your style of comedy?
I don't know what just happened. I never made a decision. Probably, I would say my biggest inspiration was probably Mad Magazine, because they don't take any prisoners. You know, they hit hard. When Mad satirizes, they kick you pretty hard. You know, it's edgy, vicious satire.
Yeah.
You know, I don't like wimpy satire. You know, I like it nice and below the belt. You know.
Yeah.
And Mad doesn't take any prisoners. So that would be my number one, probably, influence in tone. You know, and Carlin was such an inspiration. Interesting, Cosby never really inspired my style at all. He was his own man, and I'm my own man. Carlin, I'm a little closer to his type of style. I don't know how much he influenced me, but I'm closer to his stuff. But Cosby's excellence was what just left me in awe, because he was brilliant.
Yeah.
You know, his style was remarkable, and so clean, too. It was beautiful. There are two different types of comics. Carlin's filthy, Cosby's clean, but they both had inspirational styles.
And you kind of talked about this a little bit already, but what advice would you give to beginner comedians?
Well, I would say don't take any advice. Be careful what advice you take, because you can get messed up by advice, you know?
Yeah.
If I taught a comedy class once at Northeastern, and the first thing I would say, if I was teaching a comedy class today, first of all, you got 2 strikes against you because you're here. Because you're here in this comedy class. I'm going to help you, I'm going to work with you, but you got 2 strikes against you, because you have to have the quality of arrogance to be a great comedian. You have to feel that you don't need anybody's advice, that you're your own person, and I'm going to do it my way, whether anyone likes it or not. You have to have a little bit of that attitude.
Yeah.
And if you come in with the approach, gee, what should I do? I should talk to some of these veteran comedians. Maybe they can. You already are on your heels. You're back on your heels already. You're going to walk in the room. You want to be polite. You want to be deferential on the outside. You want to be respectful to everybody. But in the inside, you secretly have to be a little bit cocky.
Yeah.
If you're not, you're in trouble. Because it takes a lot of arrogance to go on stage, especially in a nightclub full of drunks, and say, I'm going to make these people laugh for 35 minutes.
Yeah. So you have to be really confident.
Beyond confidence.
Beyond confidence.
Confidence not enough. You got to be cocky.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to just know your act. You got to be able to sell it with pizzazz. It's that little extra arrogance that carries you over, because a crowd can smell fear coming from any comic.
Yeah.
And you can deliver a perfect joke, and you can deliver it with expertise. But if they can sense that you're worried about how this is going to go over, you're in trouble.
Yep.
They need to get the sense that you don't care one way or another whether this works. You're just up there to have fun.
Yeah.
And the best thing I've ever heard about comedy, the best nugget of wisdom I've ever heard, is the key to being a good comedian is to go up there to give laughs, not get them.
Yeah. So feel like you're up there
dishing out the fun.
Yeah, you're not worried about what they're gonna think.
Deep down inside, you are worried. Deep down inside, you are greedy. But on the outside, you got to send the message out that I'm dishing out the fun here. It's a party, and if I wasn't getting paid and we were hanging out in somebody's house, I'd get up and do this for free. I happen to be getting paid.
Yeah.
But I would do this for free because I'm a fun-loving guy. And if you ran into me at a bar, I would start telling you jokes, not for the money, just for the fun of it. Now, that's not how you really feel all the time when you go on stage, but you got to make it seem like that.
Yeah. All right.
And if you come on stage with that attitude, right away you can start getting laughs. But if you have any sense of nervousness, it will take you a while.
Yeah. I think sometimes I've gone up, I've been nervous, and the crowd has definitely noticed it. So
they can smell it, even if they don't realize that they can smell it.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Now, can you tell us a little bit about the book you wrote, 101 Stories of American History?
Oh yeah, thank you. I'm on WBZ pretty regularly. I'm on for the 13th of January. I'm developing a little bit of a following now on WBZ. It's like I'm two completely different people, but I wrote this book called 101 Stories of American History. It's available online on Amazon. I sell it at shows. It's pretty hard to sell books at shows, but I do okay with it. It's a lot of fun. I've written a gigantic, complete history of the United States. It's 3.3 million words. The Bible's 1 million words. I've written 3.2 Bibles.
Wow.
In terms of volume. And a lot of it's available online. I don't encourage people to read it online. If you're curious and you want to find it, you can find it, because they're rough. Most of them are rough drafts.
Yep.
So I have each administration from Washington all the way to the current Obama administration. I have a separate manuscript for all of these administrations. It's a total comprehensive history of the United States. And what's going to happen very soon, within the next month, I'm going to release one at a time each book under the large title of A Comedian's History of the United States.
And is that going to be published or just released on?
Oh no, it's going to be published through Amazon. So I'm just finishing the manuscripts. But what it is, it's mostly serious. It's not totally a goof. But as a comedian, when you hear there's a comedian in the title, then you know there's going to be jokes here and there, just a little bit here and there, not completely over the top.
Yep.
So it's very unique. And in terms of self-education, I've set a new standard. No one's ever done what I've done. Even if nothing happens from here, but something is going to happen. But if nothing ever happened from here, just the effort itself, to write a manuscript of this size with no encouragement from anybody. I'm a university dropout.
Yeah.
And people have actually discouraged me from doing this. Whatever you want in life, there's always going to be naysayers. Stick to comedy, stick to comedy, stick to comedy. We'll see about this. I've already made some money on my first book, and I've got several more coming out. Comedy, unless you make it big in comedy, there's not a lot of money to be made at the working class end. You know?
Yes, yeah, so you were just writing this book in your free time for fun?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've always studied. Since I was a little boy, I've always studied history. I used to go to the South Boston Public Library and read all the World War II books when I was 12 years old. And so I get to the point where then I became a student of Russian history, Japanese history, and when I got to be about 30, 35, I started thinking, you got to do something with this. You put so much time into all this studying, you got to do something. Well, you're a comedian, and you're a scholar, self-educated, but you are a scholar. Well, why not combine these two things and create something original, something unique? Because I got news for you. If you kick ass on a comedy stage, BFD, there's about 10,000 people in the United States that can do that.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of people that kill on stage in comedy clubs every Saturday night all over the country. There's 10,000 comedians killing on stage. It's a great profession, but it doesn't make you all that special to do it. When I started out, that was different because there were a handful of comedians in the country. Yeah, I felt special at first.
Yeah.
You know, when you're 23 years old and there's no comedy clubs, and you're out doing you're headlining comedy shows that aren't even at comedy clubs because you initiated it, and it's brand new and it's exciting. Well, that was a different dynamic. Now there's so many clubs, there's so many comedians. You know, my name floats around, but you don't feel special when there's this many comedians out there. But to write a history book and to go on, I've been on WBZ radio as a studio guest for 107 hours.
Wow.
That's an amazing stat. I'm developing a following. People are calling up from all over the country going, every time this Mike Donovan's on, he's so interesting to listen to. Where can I buy his book? I mean, how many comedians can say that? They've written a gigantic history book. They got this other side, like a Jekyll and Hyde, they got this other person that's a legitimate historian.
Yeah.
I've been on it for so long. If I was a charlatan, if I was a fake, WBZ wouldn't have me on anymore. You know, the callers would jump in and scream, this guy doesn't know anything, his stats are... But I know my stuff, I know my history, and I'm articulate, and people are starting to like me. And, you know, at my age, I'm 61, I'll be 62 next month. At my age, if you want to just fade out as an old comedian, you're a turkey.
Yeah.
You know, you got to find something new and exciting all over again, because I'm 19 all over again, starting... you know, emerging now as a historian. But I saw this 12 years ago. I was looking back 12 years ago thinking, you know, I don't intend to fade off as a prune, just a relic of a shadow of my former self. Oh, he's a Boston legend. Now he's 75. He's on stage. He comes out with his cane and he tells his old jokes and people talk about, oh, he's a Boston legend. I don't want to be one of those token grandpas from the old comedy world. I don't want to be remembered as somebody who he started out in the old ding-ho days. Oh, gee, how exciting. Nobody's going to give a shit at 50 years from now.
Yeah.
But history books are relevant. If they're excellent, they're relevant for a long, long time. A long time. 100 years after I'm dead, my history books might count, but nobody's going to give two shits about my comedy 100 years from now. Nobody.
Yeah.
Nobody. I know a guy, Bill Campbell, said to me, this was a while ago, 12 years ago, he was talking about Richard Pryor, and his 18-year-old son looked at him and said, who's Richard Pryor?
Yeah.
That hit me like a lead brick.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa,
should know.
You know, I was already going in the direction I'm going, but that was like, that's an attention getter. You know, when you realize that even somebody like Richard Pryor, their memory is going to fade. You know, people think that today's comedians are so important. They think that today's movies are so important. Today's musicians are so important. But that's transient. It's ephemeral. It doesn't last.
Yeah.
But a good history book lasts forever. Also because writing itself, the craft of writing is timeless. You can read a book from 1814 and it rocks today if it's well done.
Yep.
But you listen to a stand-up comedy album from 1957, you roll your eyes, go, oh, brother.
Yeah.
Because it's from somebody else's generation. Generations want their own style of comedy. They want their own style of music. They want their own style of TV shows. But a history book is timeless if it's well done. Any type of a book is timeless if it's well done, because the language doesn't change except for slang.
Yep. Yeah, my grandfather was in World War II, and he passed away. But as I get older, I start to realize, I wish I would have asked him more questions about World War II when he was alive, because it gets more interesting to me as I get older.
I have a 800,000 page, 800. Let me see. Yeah, it's almost a million. Out of my 3.2 million words, 3.3, about 800,000 words are about World War II. So if you go onto my website, comedianmikedonovan.com, you can read all the World War II stuff.
Wow.
You'll stay up all night.
Yeah. All right. Well, before I let you go, we have a part of the show called Questions from the Fans.
Yep.
And if you don't mind, I'd like to read you a couple of emails.
Oh, sure.
All right. First email is from Blake Chappie. Blake wants to know, who was the best person you have worked with, and who was the worst?
The best person? Well, Stephen Wright is, I've always been a writer, and I probably have a diary / journal that's 1 million words from the early days. Not only is Stephen Wright a great friend today, but reading my old diaries, which I'm turning into a book, by the way. It's going to be like the comedy of the early years. People distort their memory system, and they remember things that didn't happen. You go back and you read your journals, and you realize, oh, this is what really happened. So some people turn out pretty bad going back. You go, oh, what a jerk. Oh, this person's really behaving badly. But Stephen Wright was such a fine person, even when he was working at the Coop in Harvard Square. Every time his name comes up in my diaries, he's just a fantastic person and one of the greatest comedians of all time. And then he also took me on the road, and I opened for him in about 38 cities. So that was a big thrill for me. But Stephen Wright's probably the best guy. And the worst guy, I don't know. There's too many of them.
All right.
But I would say the legend is not true that me and Denis Leary had a bad. It's been exaggerated. There was a small difference between us. I didn't act particularly nice about it. I think I was more at fault than him. So I would like to take that question and turn it around and say it's not true that I hate Denis Leary. I really am proud of what he's done, and I think he's a decent person. We were never friends. We started out as friends, but I think maybe I messed up more than he did. I might have overreacted to some things that he did. My behavior wasn't perfect, so I would just say I wouldn't mention anyone that I hated. There's a few people I don't like, but he's actually not one of them, and stories have gone around that I hate him, and that's not true at all.
Okay. All right. Second email is from William Ryan Jones. William wants to know, what is your opinion on joke theft?
I have no idea what it is.
You have no idea?
No. What's joke theft?
Oh, I'm sorry. Joke theft. Like,
joke theft.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's part of why I had a problem with Denis, and it's one of the reasons I don't want to be a comedian, because if I get I'll do it a little bit. If I made it big as a writer, I would do comedy a little bit here and there. But one of the reasons I don't like to do stand-up comedy is there's so much stealing.
Yeah.
There's one thing I'd like to be remembered for when I pass away is that guy never stole a joke. I have never been accused of stealing a joke ever in my entire life.
Yep.
That's not bad for 42 years.
Yeah.
No one's ever confronted me and said, you took my joke, or you took so-and-so's joke, or that joke came from George Carlin. Who are you kidding? That's never happened to me one time. But there's so many thieves out there, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's really unbelievable. And the worst is that they steal from fellow comics.
Yep.
And the other part is you can't backstage. You got to be careful what you say to people off stage, because next thing you know, they're doing it on stage. You're like, what the hell? I just said that to you off stage yesterday, and now you're doing it on stage. Now I can't talk to you anymore.
Yeah.
You know, how do you live with yourself? You know, they say knowledge is its own reward, but so is an honesty.
Yeah.
So you're not going to get rewarded in comedy for being honest. You're going to get punished. There's a lot of people that are thieves that go on to big-time success, and you just have to. And I also know for a fact there's a lot of comics that were pretty good, and they made it to the middle spot, okay? They made it to the middle spot, and they were very honest, and they had a lot of integrity. They eventually dropped out of comedy because they couldn't reach the headliner spot, okay? Yeah. These people, if they had been thieves, don't you think they could have moved on to the headliner spot?
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
So you got to say, God bless these people that had to walk away from comedy because they didn't resort to stealing in order to stay in.
Yep. Yeah. I've heard stories about people saying, certain people will have people that work for them go to shows and get material and bring it back to them. Heard stories like that.
Well, there's so much of it. I'd say 33% of the comedy world is dishonest.
Yep.
On stage. Now, in the writer's world, you're looking at 2%.
Yeah.
That's a big difference. There's a lack of integrity in stand-up comedy. Not everybody, but it's a huge percentage. And to me, and derivative is the same as a switch is a steal. You take a joke and you switch it around a little, so technically you didn't steal it, but you're sitting out there in the audience, you go, well, I know you stole that joke. I see how you switched it up. But you and I both know you stole it.
Yeah. But do comedians in the comic community, they know which people are the ones that steal jokes? And
no, not at all.
No?
Because they don't know the veterans.
Yeah.
You know, they know, the young comics know which young comics are stealing.
Yeah.
But the young comics don't know which old comics are stealing because they don't have an encyclopedic knowledge like I do.
Yeah.
Going back to the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, what can you do? You know, I used to confront people about it, and then I realized people start to dislike me personally. You know, like, well, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
You know, I thought I'd be rewarded. People say, Mike's doing a great job policing the situation. And then I realized, somebody sat me down and said, you know, a lot of people don't like you now because you're confronting too many people about stealing. And I went, well, that was about 1990. And since then, I just do whatever you do.
Yeah.
It's not worth it anymore.
Yeah.
It would have been worth it if I thought my reputation behind my back was growing because I was confronting people.
Yeah.
But it turned out the reverse. My reputation was falling. To avoid that Mike Donovan guy. He might give you a hard time about some joke you did that was too close to somebody else. Really? People are saying that about me behind my back? Well, I better stop doing that.
Yeah.
And I don't do that anymore. You do what you do, and I'll just try to be a historian and a writer.
Yeah.
And a history. By the way, I did my first military history lecture 2 months ago at the Nahant American Legion post.
All right.
And they had no idea that I was a comedian. I was introduced as the guest speaker tonight. He's the author of the upcoming book, Woodrow Wilson and World War I. And now it was the Veterans Day dinner. I was the keynote speaker, and I gave a 1-hour speech about World War I, and I got well paid relative to me.
Yeah.
And that's a new career. That was a month and a half ago. So this is just the beginning. Like I said a few minutes ago, I feel like I'm 19 again mentally. I'm starting a new career.
Yeah.
And I'm excited about it. Now, at the same time, I'll still hang on to my credits as a stand-up because that also validates this gimmick that I'm doing where I'm taking history and sprinkling it with a sense of humor. If I tried to do that as a historian at a college, it would be a little weird. But since I'm already a comedian, I can do that.
And it must help you, right? When you're speaking, I assume you feel more comfortable from being a comedian.
Yes. And when it works both ways. Being a comedian gives you confidence in that, and also knowing that you're educated and you're strong makes you feel a little more confident as a comedian.
Yep. All right. Well, I think that's all the questions I have. Pete, where can people go to find your book?
Amazon. It's under comedian Mike Donovan, not just Mike Donovan, because people say, I tried to find your book and I couldn't find you.
Yeah.
Because my first name is comedian.
All right, and people can go to your website. It's comedianmikedonovan.com.
Yes.
And I think.
And also, those manuscripts are not. Most of them have been improved since. These are rough drafts that were put up there many months ago. So if you see a lot of typos, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's just something temporary that I throw up there. It's almost like a backup system. People throw this stuff on a flash drive.
Yep.
I do a rough draft and I throw it up on the internet, but it doesn't mean that's the final book I'm standing by on the internet.
Yeah. Well, it's nice for people to be able to look at for free.
Yeah, that's
cool.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
And hopefully I can talk to you again sometime.
And good luck with your comedy career.
Yeah. Thank you. All right.
All right. Thank you. Bye.